Ant-Man is the only one. If they do misfire, I think that on their lineup, that'll probably be the one that they do.
I mean, to me, it seems like unless they're just scaling it down to mitigate the risk, it does like seem one of the riskier properties, you know.
Yeah, but I don't think they're spending that whole much, a whole bunch of money.
I can't imagine.
Right,
Paul Rudd, he can't be. Marvel's notoriously cheap,
right.
so they're probably throwing him like $5 million if he's lucky, and spending 100 on it instead of 200, maybe. Well, we'll see. But
The next lineup, one after that they have after that, which starts their lineup in 2017, is Guardian of the Galaxy 2.
nice.
Um, no real story yet on what the story behind that is. It's probably going to play in a little bit to some of the stuff that ended in Avengers, the first Avengers, where they had the character of Thanos,
Yep. Yep.
who's going to be the big bad that's kind of like circulating through all of these movies. He's going to be kind of like the ultimate one.
Yeah, he popped up in the first Avengers at the end, right?
You're
The
right.
end of the first Avengers, and
He's been mentioned in Guardians of the Galaxy.
yep.
Um, and he's going to be playing a role throughout a number of these. So there's not really too much that they've said about Guardians 2, other than the fact that they're probably not going to integrate them as of yet with like the Earth heroes with the Avengers and so forth. Um, and I mean, they came around, after the numbers that Guardians did this summer. They announced that there was going to be a second one almost like
Immediately.
almost immediately.
That's my one of my worries is that from the story that I hear, uh, some screenwriter, I think it was a young, uh, this young woman wrote a draft of Guardians of the Galaxy, and they were amazed by it. And then, what's his name from James Gunn did a redraft of it, and they're like, "This is even better." And it was like it was sort of a long trajectory, and my worry is that that they're just gonna try to turn this thing around too fast. So
I don't know. I mean, depending on the way they've set this up and the way that they're kind of branching off, this opens them up to do a whole lot of stuff with Guardians. I mean, there's a whole set of space superhero characters that they haven't even touched on. There's one called Nova, which he was big. He was kind of like in many ways he was kind of like kind of like almost like a Spider-Man type character. He was a high school guy who kind of got these space-bound powers, and he ran with a number of different super teams and stuff like that. And Nova was pretty big during the 70s and 80s and came back, had a resurgence in a couple of the comic books a couple of years later. So that has a whole area that they can kind of branch off to. And this is what I think Marvel's being smart, because they lost a lot of their major superhero characters when they almost went bankrupt back
right,
in what is it,
that's
2006 or something, or before that,
and that's when is that no well
97 or something, like it was the
yeah
90s.
right because that's when they licensed Spider-Man to Sony or
Right. That's
okay
when Marvel was on the verge of going bankrupt. So the only thing that they really had was like their intellectual property characters. So they sold the movie rights of Spider-Man off to Sony. They sold off the movie rights of the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and these were their three biggest sellers.
right
They sold those off to Fox and to I can't remember right now, but some of their major characters.
that still might be isn't X-Men still Sony? It might still
No,
be
it's
no
still Fox. Fox.
oh okay
Fox has
gotcha okay
yeah, Fox has basically uh Fantastic Four and X-Men.
oh okay and then
And
Sony
all the
is Spider-Man.
characters like Wolverine and stuff like that that basically kind of plays in. Um
So weren't you saying they're playing with the idea of trying to license Sony's Spider-Man property or something?
well, all of them after and DC's doing the same thing too. After the success that Marvel had, all of these studios now are basically trying to universe build. To have like this, where all of your superheroes, all the movies kind of play one into another, and they're trying to tap into that. Um, Sony was looking to do that with Spider Man, but they only had Spider Man and his associated villains.
Right.
So they didn't have enough characters to really build out. So what they were going to do is actually license some of his villains. So they were going to do a Venom movie, and what they were going to do was a Secret Six movie, which is, you're going to take all of his best villains and you're going to have them do
It's pretty
something.
thin. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
And the movie, the last Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, didn't, it did well. It didn't do poorly. I mean, they
Yeah.
made their money back on it and stuff. But it didn't do the type of numbers that they had anticipated it doing. And Spider-Man is overall by far the most profitable movie franchise, that a superhero franchise that's been out. Definitely of the Marvel
Right.
characters.
Because even that third Sam Raimi destroyed the box office, even though it was not so good.
Right.
It killed.
Right.
You know.
So Sony's basically, they're trying to get a piece of that large Avengers budget.
Right. Right.
So one of the things that they were talking about, and there's been rumors going back and forth, that Sony is more open now to doing some type of joint licensing deal with Marvel Studio, profit sharing or something. And that way Spider-Man could be reintroduced into the Marvel universe, the cinematic universe. That would help them be able to push some of their properties. It would help out on some of the storylines that Marvel wants to do, especially one of the ones, So
I've been saying that for years, though. I don't understand why. What's the big deal if Marvel throws them like, 10, 20 million bucks to have a Spider-Man cameo? What's the downside really, as long as there's some kind of restriction?
I mean, if you look what happened with in the new one, Age of Ultron, they have Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, who were longtime Avengers, but they also had an affiliation with the X-Men. Did you see the last X-Men Days of Future Past?
I saw the second half of it. I don't know how it ends, but yeah.
Well, Quicksilver was in that, and the Scarlet Witch were both in that one. Quicksilver was a large part of that movie.
Did they raid that temple at the end? Is that when they came in?
Yeah, when they basically broke Magneto out of prison.
Okay.
And the Quicksilver part was the best part of the movie. The problem was not the problem, but now you're going to have Quicksilver in Age of Ultron. So you have that same character basically now appearing in both movies from different studios. So to a certain extent, it can be done. It has happened. Whether or not Sony and Marvel will basically be able to coordinate on a property as large as Spider-Man, that's the issue. I just know for right now, Sony's Spider-Man aspirations are kind of dead in the water,
Right. Yeah, they got to do something with it. That's interesting. Yeah. So, and then DC came out with their own lineup. I think they're going to do Shazam and a couple others.
DC announced their stuff like 2 weeks before Marvel did.
Oh, did